much for having me. I haven't been here much this summer, so it's great to be back. And it's nice to see some of y'all that I've met before here, and happy to see some people that I haven't met before. So that's great. You've got a handout, apparently, that tells you a little bit about me, but I got started doing this kind of work after I began taking care of my mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's about almost 20 years ago now, and I could not find anyone to help answer my questions about how to care for her in a way that felt loving and protective and supportive and financially doable and all of those things. There was just no place to turn, and so I decided to sort of make that my mission over the next few years, and that's what I've been doing. Today we're going to talk about separation anxiety. That is frequently part of a bigger topic. It's the first time, I'll tell y'all, it's the first time I've just really drilled down and thought about this by itself as a sort of a standalone issue. So that's been really beneficial, I think, helpful for me. But I think one of the places to start is by realizing, and this is going to be repetitive because you all have learned a lot of this already, but because dementia, especially Alzheimer's or vascular dementia or those kinds of things that we encounter later in life, with the understanding that they are progressive, that there is not anything that we're going to be able to do as caregivers or as family members that can back it up or that can undo damage that's been done. We can help, we can learn how to adapt and how to direct things in a way that makes it more functional for us. But what is happening is probably not going to get better until it reaches a tipping point. And that's a tipping point that most of us don't really look forward to. We go through an early period, that mild to moderate dementia stage, when everything is sort of, can be a battle. We've got somebody that's always trying to reorient themselves or ask questions or be engaged or all of those things, and that can make our job harder. But when the tipping point comes and they no longer try or they no longer care or are able to engage, in some ways that makes our job easier and get in other ways more emotionally painful. So it's not a tipping point that we look forward to, but until we get to that tipping point, these kinds of things such as shadowing behavior or clinginess or separation anxiety are going to get more and more difficult, and there's no amount of behavior modification that's going to fix that. Every now and then I'll work with a caregiver who says, well, if I keep just telling him no and shutting the door, he'll learn. Well, he won't. You know, it's not that people can't adapt, but trying to modify somebody's behavior in a punitive way is not going to fix it. But there are some things that we can do. And the more that somebody's dementia progresses in that mild to moderate stage, the more, as you all know, they begin to depend on their caregiver. That caregiver becomes their attachment to their former world. And so that makes that person so central. That is the one person that is the most familiar to them. That is their tie to everything that they know or knew. And anytime that person is out of sight now, they may become frightened or anxious. And we see that agitation level go up because being with that primary caregiver is what gives them a sense of security. And some of that is because their brain isn't able to extrapolate to a person in another room. So once you're out of sight, you're just gone. You're not just down the hall, you're gone. And so that becomes very scary. The other part is that the world now, even their familiar environment, can still seem unfamiliar, or they may not know how to engage with it or what something means when they see it. And this can happen so incrementally that sometimes as caregivers we're not even aware that we've taken another step in that direction, and that now what used to be familiar, maybe your loved one used to be able to use the remote to operate the TV, and now they don't understand how to use it and they're not pushing the right buttons. So you as the primary caregiver become their interpreter, their translator, their connector, the person that makes everything in their world make sense to them. You can be the facilitator so that everything works, and without you nothing works or nothing makes sense. We have to keep reminding ourselves, as frustrating as it gets, that they are not doing this on purpose, and they're not doing it to annoy us, and they're not doing it to get on our nerves. It is a lifeline for them. It's as if there's a boat and you threw somebody a rope and they're holding on for dear life, not to be lost in the open ocean by themselves. This is how your loved one holds on to you. You are that rope in the open ocean that's really scary, and you help them feel connected and that they won't get lost. So we know that it's not always possible to pinpoint exactly why this is happening in a certain way on any given day, but we can start to address maybe what are some of the underlying issues that might be triggering real separation anxiety, or that kind of is shadowing behavior. When I say that, y'all know what I'm talking about. When somebody just sticks right with you all the time. Everywhere you go in the house, they need to be there. They're just a step behind you everywhere you go, and it's exhausting. You never have a moment to yourself. Even they're knocking on the door when you're trying to go to the bathroom. You know, are you in there? Are you in there? So one of the things that we can do, though, is start to pay attention to when this behavior seems the most pronounced. And let me just, as an aside, those of y'all that have worked with me in the past, you know that behavior or behaviors is not a word I'm very comfortable with when we talk about people with dementia. Sometimes it's just the most expedient word to use, but in my understanding of dementia, what we might call a behavior for me is the way that someone has to express a need that they have. So rather than behavior, which we'll maybe use as a shorthand, but I always want you to be translating it in your brain into expression of a need, because people with dementia no longer have the vocabulary or the acuity in their brain to express what their needs are. They may feel a need, and we're going to talk about what some of those might be, but they are not able to translate that into a request or an expression of what that need is, but their behavior shows us what they need. And so we have to sort of be detectives to figure out what they might need that's causing this and see if we can help meet that need in another way. So for instance, one of the things that we might pay attention to is if that shadowing behavior is something that is consistent. Does it happen from the minute we get up in the morning till the minute we go to bed at night? Or does it seem more pronounced at different times of the day? Is it precipitated by something that happens? Maybe anytime somebody knocks on your door or rings the doorbell, suddenly your loved one is right up there next to you and wants to see what you're going to do and where you're going to go and are you going to open the door? How's this going to work? Sometimes it's because you're not in their sight anymore. You may have been in the kitchen, you're fixing breakfast, and you say, okay, sit right here and have your breakfast. I'm going to go do whatever. And the minute you leave the space, suddenly they're up and behind you. You thought they were going to be good, eating their breakfast for a while, but they're not. So we want to look at, and it will help us, we can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together if we say, okay, every time I leave the room, my loved one gets anxious. My loved one feels the need to get up and follow me. Or every time I get on the phone, my loved one gets anxious and they feel the need to be right there with me, which is so hard sometimes when you're trying to take care of, or anytime I go to the bathroom, or anytime I try to take a shower, or I just need to go to the mailbox and check the mail. You know, you can kind of get an idea of particular triggers if there are specific things. One thing to keep in mind, because it's a clue, is when your loved one shadows or follows or stays with you, are they also trying to do what you're doing? Are they mimicking your behavior? Are they putting their hands in the same place where you are working? Or are they trying to help? Are they trying to engage? Are they shutting cabinets? You're trying to put the dishes away and they keep shutting the cabinet doors. Are they engaging in some way? This will be a clue. And the other question to ask yourself is, am I this person's primary source of social engagement? Am I the one that they look to for all the social stimulation that they are getting? Because that's going to give us an answer that's going to help us. Now, there are certain things that we know about our loved one if we're taking care of somebody that we love. We know who they were before dementia. We remember them. We know what was important to them, most likely. We may know deep things about them that no one else knows. If you've been married to someone for a long time, there are things that you know that nobody else really knows. Or if you grew up with someone, a sister or a brother, so you know what their routines were, you know what's important to them, and that's all going to give us some clues. You may also notice that this kind of behavior ramps up in that time of day that we refer to as sundowning. Y'all are familiar with this term, I know. And so there are things that we know about the proverbial sundowning that can be important to us. For instance, that term was coined because people late in the day started becoming more agitated or more anxious. And the research and the studies that have been done about sundowning have pointed to some very specific factors. One of those is loss of light. So if your loved one becomes more clingy, more dependent late in the day, you need to make sure that there's plenty of light on. And we saw this, we always see this as more of a problem when we go into homes where we have a retired couple, very elderly. Their generation never left the lights on if they didn't need to. They turned off the lights everywhere that they weren't using them. They only turned on a lamp if they were reading. They didn't turn off the overhead light. They were very thrifty about using electricity. And that can really contribute to that sundowning activity. So light is very important for brain stimulation. So if you find that your loved one and those dusk hours or early in the evening, those behaviors are becoming more pronounced, make sure that you've got a lot of light on and different kinds of light. So in a good dementia-friendly environment, we've got maybe sconce lighting on the wall, we've got overhead lighting, we've got task lighting, lamps, we've got lots of light coming from lots of different directions, and that helps the brain stay more wide awake. We also find that actually being out in sunlight makes a big difference. So the more sunshine that your loved one can get during the day, the less likely they are to have those symptoms later in the day. So if sundowning is a big problem for your loved one, make sure y'all are getting some sunlight. Make sure that you're really addressing those wake-sleep cycles. People tend to sundown or have more pronounced behaviors late in the day because they're tired, and not just physically tired, but they're psychologically and emotionally tired. So if you think about what it takes for you or I to just come over here and take the lid off of a bottle of water and take a drink, that really didn't take a lot of effort on my part. But when somebody has dementia and they've got to think, okay, that's a bottle of water, that has something in it that I can drink. Okay, I'm gonna get to that. If you think about every little bit of thought process that somebody has to go through that's struggling with dementia to do the most simple tasks, you start to realize why just at the end of a couple of hours they can get really exhausted and become really dependent because they're just out of energy. It takes so much energy for them to just do simple things like being dressed, having something to eat, getting in the car, going someplace, that can just be exhausting for someone whose brain has to work so hard for every little thing. Sometimes I work with caregivers who get really anxious and uncomfortable if their loved one is sleeping too much. Those extra naps are important for people with dementia. They get really, really tired. Their brains are tired, their bodies get tired. You know, we forget that our brains are making everything in our body function. Our brains are making our limbs move, our brains are making our hearts beat. Even those involuntary functions are controlled by a brain that's struggling. So just living is harder for those brains and more exhausting. So everything about life for somebody with dementia is harder and more tiring. So those extra naps are critical, and they can, and we don't need to worry that they're sleeping a lot. They're more tired than they've ever been. Also, taking a nap or lying down or shutting their eyes is a way to take a break sometimes when they need it. When we're asking them questions or we're asking them to participate in things that we're doing or including them in the things that we're involved in, there's a lot of pressure. They're supposed to try to figure out what the right answers are. They're supposed to try to figure out where they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to go. And it's one of the reasons why they latch onto you and want to be with you all the time. Because if they're with you, they don't have to be trying to figure it out every minute. Because you'll make sure they do what they need to do or they are where they need to be. But retreating from that and taking a break from that is something that a nap can provide. So unless you're having extreme difficulty with someone who wants to sleep all day and be awake all night, which is a different kind of problem that we work on in a different way, I would say daytime naps are not a bad thing. You also are going to use that knowledge that you have of someone's former routine. So for instance, if you find that every day about 3 o'clock, your sister is following you constantly, or is trying to go out the door, or is up on the move and can't settle down, if you think about maybe the fact that she was a school teacher, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when things got really busy, getting kids to the bus and kids loaded up and taken home and meeting her own children, all of those things, then you know why she's really stimulated at that time of day and feels a need to be doing something. She knows there's something. Her body still tells her that this is a busy time of day for her. And even if somebody's been retired a long time, as their dementia progresses, they go back and pull from behind those things that were part of their life that were deeply imprinted. Hey, Robert. So use your knowledge of their former routines. And maybe you haven't even thought about it much lately, but think back to this person that you're caring for and think about, replace them in your head at their most vital point of life. When were they the most powerful, the most in control? When do you think, what part of their life do you think meant the most to them, or when they felt the most in charge of things? That's probably in some ways what their body recreates as a pattern for them now. It could be that, or on the other hand, it might be the part of their life that was the most stressful. Maybe they went through a trauma or a tragedy, and they were trying to deal with something that was very difficult, and they may still be trying to resolve that. They may still be trying to work that out in their head, and it may be taking them into a place that only you would know about. So really think about this person and who they were long before they had dementia, and put that template of who they were on where they are now, and see where you can find things that might be lining up with what happened in their previous existence. So the way that we respond as caregivers matters when someone is tagging along with us or wants to be right where we are. If we are resistant and we push away, they will push back and try harder. So what we need to do, and you saw Alicia sort of demonstrating this with your loved one, is move with them. And she was doing that just as she should, matching her gait, moving along with her, shoulder to shoulder, together. We're together here. I'm not pushing you, I'm not dragging you, I'm with you. And moving with someone like that is very powerful. Using a gentle, calming tone. Now, I know we can kind of run out of that. We get toward the end of the day. We got a lot of gentle, calming tone till about 11 o'clock in the morning, and then we're done. But the more we can use that, the more it helps settle us, and the more it helps settle them. And if and when you have the energy, and believe me, having been in a caregiving role, I know that energy is finite, and that we only have so much of it doled out about per week. And we have to survive too, right? And we're going to talk about that when we get more toward the end of this. But we need to make the effort to make eye contact. Eye contact is powerful, and we forget sometimes in the flurry of the doing how important it is to connect. And what they're seeking in that constant, I've got to be with you all the time, is that feeling of connection and safety. And they don't get that without eye contact. That eye contact is what says to them in a way that words won't make sense to them anymore, is I am here. I am with you. And I'm not going to let you down. So when you can take a breath, and I never say, you should be, you ought to be, you're supposed to be. All of that, the reality of caregiving is too deep, too dense, too overwhelming. But when you can, make eye contact. And you will find that the connection will help the suggestion or the compliance in a way that just talking over or around or under or through somebody just doesn't do it. This was not my idea, and this is a little bit of trouble, but it gets huge points for creativity. I worked with a caregiver who had her daughter take a videotape of her cleaning the kitchen. They loaded it on a DVD, and she would put her husband in his chair and put the DVD on in the TV while she cleaned the kitchen. So he could watch her on the DVD, and she talked to him while she was cleaning, and he would sit in the recliner in the living room and watch the DVD of her cleaning the kitchen, sometimes over and over for hours. And she said, it saved my life. And the day that that stopped working, she started, the next thing she did after that, this was an amazing creative lady, the next thing she did after that was she read books to him that she knew she liked. She put it on cassette tapes. This has been a while. But she said, that's what I had. I still had a little cassette player and a little recorder, and I could do this. It wasn't complicated. I could do it myself. And she plugged his headphones into that, and he would sit and listen to her read to him. So she created a connection with him and gave him a sense that she was there with him while she was out and about in the yard or in the house doing other things. And she said it kept him calm and settled because he didn't feel disconnected from me. He felt like I was there with him. So we gave her big points for creativity, but some of the other things that people have found that have worked really well to help their loved one be settled for a while in one place so that they can do other things are a bird feeder. Sitting and watching the birds can be really engaging. And if you can get over the idea that it might be more trouble than it's worth, I've had a couple of caregivers who have either gotten dogs or cats. And having a cat in the lap to just sit and stroke, or an older dog, can be very, very calming for someone with dementia, and it makes them feel connected to something in a way that gives them some peace and enables them to sit. So for some people, I know they go, oh, no, that's way beyond. But if it frees up your day in other ways and does that in a way that is really nurturing to your loved one, it's a win-win. And you could rescue a dog or a cat too. So that would make it a win-win-win. So one of the other things that we talked about was the possibility that you might be your loved one's social connection or social stimulation. And so of course that suggests to us that what we might want to do is include a couple other trusted individuals in our mix for two reasons. One, for our well-being. Well, really for three reasons. The second reason is because your loved one actually will do better with different people in their life. As a dementia prevention tool or a dementia arresting tool, the social stimulation of a variety of people is powerful for your brain. So isolation, we already know, is a huge predictor for dementia. People who are isolated tend to develop dementia faster and more profoundly than people who are more socially engaged. So the same person, that would be you, or maybe one more relative or a neighbor that interacts with your loved one on a regular basis, is not all that stimulating after a while. But other people that can be a part of their lives really does stimulate their brain and help it to work as well as it can for as long as it can. So it's good for them as a human being, as a person living with dementia, to have interaction with other people. And it's really good for you to have other people in your world that understand your loved one and that can spend time with them and give you a break. And that might be a friend, it might be a family member, it might be a paid caregiver or companion. But that, developing, the earlier the better, other trusted relationships in your loved one's life will never be the wrong thing to do. The more people that you have engaged, the better for both your loved one and for you. And the earlier you start that, the more easily they will develop a trusted bond with your loved one. So I always tell people, don't put it off until you don't have any other choice. Do it earlier rather than later. Establish a relationship with either a paid caregiver or someone that you can, I just was working with a client whose mom's house had a tree on it in that storm in June. And so her mom had to move in with her for a while, and her husband has dementia. And having her mom in her house has been a wonder for her. You know, her husband is comfortable with her mother, her husband engages with her mother, and her mother has felt really needed. Her mother had been living alone as a widow for a long time and was kind of at loose ends. So what looked like it was going to be a crisis in their lives has actually turned out to be a gift. And her mother's moving back into the house in the middle of September, but they're already working on a plan for her to come be at their house 3 afternoons a week to give this client a break. And it's not just to give the client a break, it's to communicate to mom that yes, you are still important to our family. We need you. You're a functioning contributor. So it's a positive in every possible way. And I encourage you to look for people in your neighborhood, in your church, or in your family who may kind of be at loose ends. If they've retired and they don't have a sense of really still being important and purposeful in this world, this can be huge for them. It can be, you could make it a little job or you could make it a volunteer mission, but every one of us needs to be needed. Now, I know right now y'all are needed so intensely that the idea of not being needed sounds blissful in the moment. But it's usually only for a short time that not being needed feels good to us, because we all need to feel like we have a sense of purpose. Another thing that you can do that helps somebody if they're in the mild or moderate stage is help them understand how long you'll be away from them. Time can become very problematic for someone with dementia. When you say, I'm going out to the mailbox and I'll be back in a minute, the concept of minute has no meaning for them. And so for them, all they know is you've gone out the door and you're gone. And a minute, they have no idea what that means. So if they're still able, you can use a kitchen timer that they can hold and watch it tick, and you can say, by the time it dings, I'm gonna be back. Or you could use an egg timer or an hourglass if that's something that looks familiar to them and they can watch the sand. Sometimes just the act of being in charge of this function can keep somebody settled for long enough for you to do what you have to do. Sometimes it's take a quick shower, or sometimes it's run an errand if you can be gone for 15 or 20 minutes at a time. But using something concrete that helps them see or know when the time is up, and they feel like they can have a handle on that and manage that, can be really beneficial, because giving them the abstract concept of a time frame is just not beneficial for someone with dementia. So I'm gonna take just a minute and talk about, and flip the coin and talk about what separation anxiety is like for us. And I know some of you all are experiencing that in one way or another. And you know, I almost never like to compare taking care of somebody with dementia to taking care of a child, because it's very different. Somebody with dementia has the wisdom of a lifetime in here, even if they can't access it, and they are an adult. So it's not the same. But there are some similar feelings to taking a child to preschool for the first time, or taking a college freshman and dropping them off in the dorm for the first time. It's hard for them and it's hard for us, but we do it because we know it's good for them. We know it's right for them. It's the right thing. And sometimes it's because it's the right thing for us. And that becomes really, really important, because without us, where is this person? What's gonna happen to this person we love if something happens to us? So when we do things that are good for us, it's good for them, even if they don't like it in the moment or at the time. We have to take care of ourselves, as difficult as that is. And every one of you all are in a caregiving role because you have a nurturing aspect to you and to your relationship that has said, this is what I'm called to do. This is my purpose, or this is my job, and I'm going to be here for this person. But caregiving for someone with dementia is profoundly difficult, harder than even you know. Think about that for a minute. You know how hard it is, right? It's harder even than you can realize. It does damage to your psyche, to your body, to your emotional well-being in ways that you may not even be aware of now. But very, very frequently, caregivers either get sick or die or fall or have a car accident, either before something happens to the loved one they're caring for or immediately after. When you are that physically exhausted and emotionally exhausted, you tend to fall more. You're in a hurry, you're not paying attention, your brain is not as finely focused, your balance is not as good, you just kind of stay off balance. You tend to have car accidents more often, again, because of your loss of focus, and it's not your fault. Your brain is so preoccupied with all the things that you're responsible for and all of the worries that go along with caregiving. What's going to happen tomorrow? How's this going to work when we have to go to the doctor? What am I going to do if he wets his pants when we're out? What if I can't find a bathroom that I can go into with him? Every little thing that is going through your head that is a part of an average caregiver day is damaging to your body and exhausting to your mind in a way beyond which you are even able to grasp. So if you don't make your self-care a priority, something will give. And unfortunately for a lot of caregivers, it's right after their loved one dies. It's like when their body and their brain know, this part is over. And sometimes they have a stroke, sometimes they have a car accident, sometimes they have a heart attack. And I'm not saying these things to make you all afraid or anxious. I'm saying it to emphasize the importance of going to your own doctor's appointments, making the time to get your teeth cleaned, taking a walk with a friend, taking a yoga class, going to church, whatever it's going to take to make those things possible for you to take good care of yourself. You need to do that for the love of the person that you're caring for. Sometimes that means making the choice to hire somebody to help take care of them. Sometimes that means making the choice to choose an assisted living or a long-term care center. We cannot beat ourselves up when those pivotal moments come. Even if somebody's in a long-term care center, they still need us in so many ways. The caregiving role is not over. And when somebody else is helping us, whether that's somebody that comes into our home or they're helping us in a caregiving setting, we can go back to being a spouse or a daughter or a sister or a best friend. We can go back to that relationship that we had. We can hold hands, we can sing, because we've got the energy to be that person when we're not a full-time maid and nursing assistant. When we're being a full-time maid and nursing assistant, there's no energy left for sharing those special moments. And so for the well-being of our loved one, putting yourself first is so hard for caregivers and feels impossible. But if you're struggling to find ways to do that, talk to the folks here at the Bridge and they'll help you figure out some options. Because taking care of yourself, you are just as important. And when you get into a caregiving role, somehow you make yourself less important than this other person, and that's not true. You are just as important. And so it becomes about you, and even if it makes you anxious to have someone else with your loved one, do it and do it regularly so that you can develop a comfort level with that. Even if you know your loved one hates it and is miserable for those 4 hours, you've got to take care of you because that's what's good for them. All right? Anybody have any specific questions?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
You're talking about who they depend on.
Mm-hmm.
When I go see my husband, I've had him in the VA since August 1st. By August the 10th, he had COVID, so there was a couple of weeks that I didn't go up there because I got parents that are 92.
Right.
But every time he sees me come through the door, he points at me and he heads in my direction. All the workers there, he puts his arm on me and goes, "Do you know who this is?" And I go, "No, who is it?" "This is my mother."
Mm-hmm.
He always relates to me as his mother. Yet if I say, "What's my name?" he'll say Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows my name's Jerry, but he thinks I'm his mother.
I'm going to just suggest that there may be two things at play here. One of those is that he may not actually think of you as his mother, but the word for woman who makes me feel safe for him is mother.
And the other day when I went in and he saw me, he comes up to me and goes, "I thought you were dead." I said,
Well,
"I just saw you yesterday." And he was in a really good mood, but he said, "I thought you were dead."
Yeah.
I was so glad to see you. It's like, oh my God.
My opinion of that would be that his perception of you as a person who cares for him and makes him feel safe. Yeah. And his brain down deep for him, for all of us, most of us that had, reasonably normal infancies and childhood, that first person that made us feel safe and protected.
Go
was our mother.
Jack. Yes,
So-
Jack.
I take that as a huge compliment, that he sees you as that primal person who makes him feel safe.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
We lost our son in the 1st of May, and that's every day, at least 2 times a day, and sometimes 4 times a day. I have to answer to, where is Bruce? Where's Bruce? Well, when's he coming back? Well, don't lock the door, he'll come in. Well, where's Bruce? And I'm sick of it. And we've been doing it all of May, June, July, and here we are in September.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem to ever get any less.
Mm-hmm.
What am I gonna do?
Okay, so my suggestion on that is that he needs to feel Bruce's presence. He misses him desperately. He's worried about him because he doesn't see him. And maybe even he has things he still needed to say to Bruce that he didn't get to say. And I would say, what do you miss most about Bruce? What would you say to him if he walked in the door? Really engage in connecting to Bruce with him. I would look at pictures of Bruce, and I wouldn't keep saying, don't you remember he died? Or he's gone, he's not coming back. That is, he's not able to process death and grief in a way that you and I would normally do that anymore. But I would say, remember how Bruce always used to do this? Or remember this song that Bruce loved? I would just be with Bruce in his mind, in his experience, and let him talk about Bruce and share memories of Bruce and look at pictures of Bruce. He's not done with Bruce. He still needs him. So I let him engage with Bruce in all the ways that you can do that.
Even after the 3rd or 4th time a day.
Right. Well, what we find in working with someone with dementia is that something that they come back to over and over again usually entails some unfinished business that they have with that person. And the more that you let them talk about them, spend time in their mind with them, look at pictures, the more you satisfy that need. And if you're able, so the need he's expressing in that behavior is his need to finish with Bruce. And so it would be my guess that if you're able to do that a lot over the next 2 or 3 weeks, that need will diminish.
One thing, I know we don't like to compare, but it's true on both sides, and it happened to me yesterday when we had my little baby niece at the house. They were fun, they were active, they were happy, and as soon as my sister-in-law, her mom comes in, they scream like they've been tortured all day. And the same thing I hear happens at nursing homes, where they're fun, they're happy, they're the leader of the pack, and as soon as the spouse or loved one comes in, they misbehave, and the nurses are saying, no, he's usually great. And so it's an interesting
Dynamic there, it really
you
is.
act one way with your loved one and another in a social setting, and it's interesting.
Right, each one of us has our own individual dynamic with all the people in our lives. And we see that kids have it, we see that older adults have it too. And if what you need is your loved one's attention, then you're immediately gonna go to that mode that gets their attention. They're still, even though they're not who they were before, they're still a human being with a lot of the same kinds of responses that the rest of us have to the way the world works. And they are still people with dementia, even though they've lost a lot of that upper level cognitive function, they still have, they've got 2 things going on. They've got one thing that is like those deep primal abilities or understanding of how to make things work with the people and their environment around them. And they also have deep in there some wisdom, things that they've learned over the years. And it may not always be readily available to them, but have you ever noticed how sometimes they'll say the most profound things? and you'll think, oh my gosh, maybe they are still there. You know, all of that is still there. It didn't go anywhere, but they don't have access to it anymore. Every now and then, something, it might be a smell, or it might be a song, or it might be a noise that they heard, is gonna open a little window and something's right there. You know, I'll never forget with my mom also died of Alzheimer's, and she was being assessed in a program one day, and they asked her all the things that they ask on the mini mental, and my mom's last name was Brown, mine is Hand, and she got all the answers wrong, and my mom had a PhD. She was really smart, and she always excelled in school, and it was really, really difficult for her. She could read body language, and she knew she wasn't giving the right answers. And then the lady said to her, well, I think that's all we're gonna need, Mrs. Hand. And she said, Debbie Brown. And she said, you see, we all make mistakes. You know, and I mean, that was my mom still in there, you know, and she couldn't say who the president was or write the hands on a clock, but she was still her in there. And, you know, it just, we can never, even up to the very end, there are gonna be things that our loved one retains. And, you know, it's just important for us to hang on to those things. And just as a quick aside, one of the things that is just a go-to tool all of the time is music. Anytime you're struggling with somebody, start singing a song that they know, and everything will be easier. Play music if they're anxious or agitated. Put on music that they grew up to. Music from the 40s or music from the 50s. It almost, you know, it does it for all of us. Listening to the song you fell in love to immediately gives you a sense of well-being, and it does that for them too. Research has shown that music is the last part of the brain to be affected by Alzheimer's, and so when everything else is gone, frequently music is still there. How many times have y'all, I'm sure y'all have probably watched the video on YouTube of people who have been nonverbal singing songs. So use music as a powerful tool.
He does that, and whenever they put the music on, there's two of them, him and another man, that get up and they start just, you know, moving and dancing, and of course
Right.
the workers are just laughing and,
It's
you know,
great.
trying to show them a new move.
Uh-huh.
It was funny that day, they had non-alcoholic beer for the men
Great.
and some pizza rolls.
Uh-huh.
And so
It was
one
a
of the
party.
one of the ladies goes, I want some of that.
Uh-huh.
So they gave it to her. It was
Uh-huh.
so cute. Donna, she always
Love
wants
it.
Coke.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll hang out for a minute if anybody just has something they want to talk to me about.